Same old and game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 620 for January 19th, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, to begin this week's show. Let's talk about all the things that were longer than the TikTok ban. Let's start with The Brutalist. That was longer than the TikTok ban. The Oscar ceremony, that's always longer than a TikTok ban. The
Quite a
Super
bit,
Bowl,
actually.
the InSession Film Awards, that was definitely longer than the TikTok ban.
It was like 7 times longer than the TikTok ban.
I know. My son's hair, Andrew's hair, oh my goodness. The man has a mullet. That was definitely longer than the TikTok ban.
I'll tell you what, those mullets, they're in again, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently, young kids
They're
are rocking
everywhere,
them mullets. Yeah, they're everywhere.
Absolutely. And that's what Andrew's rocking.
So he's already
Mom
trendsetter.
loves
He's the
it.
coolest kid on the block for his age.
He is. No, yeah, he's an adorable little boy, and he looks good in his little mullet, his little blonde,
Good for him.
bright blonde mullet.
Good for him.
At any rate,
that's something I wish I could grow. I once did have long hair that went down to my shoulders, but the
Yeah.
way that my hair in the back contours, I basically end up growing a rat tail because that's just how my cowlick is.
yeah, that's Andrew. I
Oh,
think
it is,
that's
okay.
partially why my wife wants him to maintain the long hair, because he has these adorable little curls at the very end of it. That is
Oh, man.
to die for.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, it's quite adorable. At any rate, there are a lot of things longer than the TikTok ban, but it's back, and I'm glad everyone fell for the scheme. We were totally scammed. But we're not a politics podcast, so we
a
don't
trap.
have to get down that rabbit hole, that TikTok hole, if you will. Instead, we're here to talk about movies, and we're going to shift officially into 2025. As we've talked about here on the show before, our calendar is slightly off by about a week or two.
Yeah.
Because we give ourselves some time to catch up on the films before we get to our award show.
A little closer because we've had award shows celebrating a prior year that ended up on like February 1st one time. We've I feel like we've condensed things a little bit.
There might have been one year that it went that late. Typically, we record mid-January, so this is about our average. And we are now shifting to 2025 as we'll talk about our most anticipated movies of the year. And I'm very excited to dig into that in the back half of the show. I do want to encourage everyone to go and check out the InSession Film Awards as we championed and celebrated the best of 2024. That was the last week's show, of course. We had a great time. Dave Giannini joined us for that episode.
It's always great.
Part 1 was the awards, all the categories, talking about the best direction of the year, the performances, the music, and everything that makes cinema great. And then part 2 was our top 10 movies of 2024, and that was a great time as well.
Great time. Yeah. We also got a chance to write up our post on the website, which you can also find as well. It's the first time I've actually done that in a while. Last I checked, I went into the website archives and was like, I haven't written up a top 10 on the website since 2021. So it's nice to get back into the swing of things. Yeah.
Which is hilarious for some inside baseball. It's not because we haven't encouraged or reminded Brendan to do it.
I just
every
chose
year.
not to do it. Yeah. I chose not to do it a few times. Yeah.
That's it. We've asked him if he was going to do it, and for whatever reason, he just hasn't been able to get one of those posts up in a few years.
I admittedly didn't have the energy in those prior years.
What's hilarious is that, as always, in my year-end list of things to do, Brendan's top 10 is always on that list. It has never changed. Throughout the years, it's always been there. And to be fair, up until 2021, he was pretty consistent about getting it up there.
Yeah.
Which is why it's on the list. And then he simply stopped. And I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at that list on my computer. It's there. Brendan's top 10. It is on.
I'm back. It's a thing. It's not a dream.
It's checked this time. But it was hilarious because this last week I was looking at it. It's a glaring hole. I did not discuss with Brendan if he was going to do it. Dave reached out and asked us both to write our top 10s. So Dave was certainly doing his job. But I didn't know that Brendan wrote it. He didn't tell me that he was writing it. It just showed up on the website one day, and I was like, oh my God, he did it.
It's amazing how quickly you can just simply reverse engineer something. So I just happened to get it done in like 45 minutes one night. I just took your list, reversed it to my content, changed the images around. Thankfully, we had 4 crossovers, so I was able to reuse at least 4 images. That certainly helped. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a really fun surprise as far as
you're welcome
content goes. But yes, all of that is up and available. And also not just our top 10s, but we put out a post on the website as well that lists out all of our nominations and winners because as you'll hear on the show, we do it individually. So my nominations are different from Brendan's, which are different from Dave's. We all have different winners most of the time. This year was a little weird in how we crossed over on a few categories. But all of that is listed out as well. You can go to the website InSessionFilm.com and we'll have a post that lists out all the nominees and winners if you want to go and check out what we nominated, what we awarded. And of course, you can check out that top 10 post as well. But if you have a few hours to spare, and by a few, I mean literally, you'll need like 7 hours.
Seven,
listen to the whole thing.
It's always around 7 hours. I feel like that's our
it's
point.
Long. It's really long.
It's locked in.
Fun.
Yeah,
it's a good time. So yeah, with all of that now out of the way, we will transition to 2025. However, while we are excited to talk about the movies of 2025, we are going to start off the show here on a little bit of a dour note, as the legendary David Lynch sadly passed away this last week at the age of 78. Mr. David Lynch. And it's interesting, when I heard the news, my immediate reaction was deep grief and sadness. And perhaps appropriately, I couldn't articulate it. I could not articulate it. I had no words. It was just a gut emotional response.
Yeah, and 5 days before his birthday was meant to take place, as well as when he passed, his birthday being January 20th, very close to where we're recording this right now. I'm with you. It was very much a speechless type moment for me. I honestly didn't even think it was real. I thought it was some type of dream or some type of fakery. I didn't buy it for a second, because I just always associated David Lynch as someone that was perhaps immortal or indestructible. I think his art is going to be immortalized for sure. I think it always has been. And we'll talk about what made him such a great artist in this tribute portion of the show. But I'm with you. I share those sentiments that I was not really sure how to react. We often talk about the grief and the devastation of some of our favorite performers, directors, whoever in the film sphere passing away. But there's something about the passing of David Lynch here that I'm not going to say it hits us harder. It just hits in a particular way that I think is affecting us so differently, because he was one of the most influential artists of all time. And I say artist in particular. I mean, filmmaker, yes, but also visual artist, painter, actor, musician. You know, we often don't talk about him as a musician. He's released albums as well that are actually really interesting. The man kind of did it all. He was the definition of an artist. I think one of the greatest to ever live as well.
Absolutely. And one of the most unique visionaries the world has ever seen, certainly the modern world. And his reputation, his legend, if you will, what he leaves behind, his legacy is unmatched. It's something that will live with us for a really long time. The term Lynchian is often overused, and
very overused.
I think what's so interesting about it is that it's so specific to his style of filmmaking, how he saw the world. And because, as you noted, Brennan, he's become so influential in terms of not just film, but also television as well.
Yeah, I didn't even talk about that.
That it's left this this imprint that can only be described as Lynchian. And as you know, we'll talk about it, but that's what's so fascinating about Lynchian. The reason that term is often overused is because of his influence. There are filmmakers, artists today that want to make film art in this avant-garde way that is that is certainly born off of that influential spectrum that David Lynch left us.
Yeah.
And we are, you know, not we, but a lot of people certainly have a hard time
the royal
articulating what it is. The royal we. Yeah. We don't, when we don't know how to articulate something, we immediately go to Lynchian because that's the legacy that he leaves behind.
It can be a bit of a trap, though, but at the same time, it goes to show the power of his influence.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to articulate here, is that whether the term is applicable or not, and oftentimes it's not necessary, but it does demonstrate the power of his influence. And despite only making a dozen movies or so, he didn't have quite the resume of something like Steven Spielberg or anyone from the old Hollywood era, especially when some of these filmmakers had 50 movies or whatever.
I know. He had a very tight filmography. I think really only 10 films, but of course he's directed
11, I think.
Well, I think there's 10 officially, but then there's also Twin Peaks, which he directed. Fire Walk with Me. And then there's of course Twin Peaks the series, which I know he didn't direct every episode, but he is certainly the brainchild of that show. And then there was Twin Peaks The Return that I believe he did direct every episode of when the show came back for another run, not too long ago, actually. But his filmography is very tight, and you know we'll talk about some of our favorite films, I'm sure. But how many directors can say that they've had their last name turned into an adjective to describe their sensibilities? It's not many.
Not many.
You have maybe Kubrickian, Spielbergian, Malickian, maybe.
Yeah.
But even so, like some of the greatest filmmakers of all time don't have that. I mean, no one really ever says Scorsesean or Tarantinoan. Some of them just sound kind of silly. Only a few filmmakers have carried this distinction, for better or for worse, as you were talking about. But it definitely shows not just how influential he was, but how much of a unique stamp that he put on his art to be able to earn that type of, you know, term associated with him.
Yeah, well, and Spielberg is interesting, right? And I'm certainly not the first to bring this up, but I do think it's such a fascinating comparison between the two, especially when you look at Spielberg in the 21st century, because Spielberg has a reputation for being a for his sentimentality, excuse me.
Yeah.
But when you really dissect his resume and you get into the 21st century work, there is a lot of dark bleakness to his films as he taps into certain paranoias, the changing landscape socially and politically, and how our society carries this kind of gray underbelly. Spielberg's movies are really not that that Spielberg sentimentality you might think of really hasn't been there in decades, in 30 years. Probably.
You're right. Especially in the early 2000s. We talked about this during our Spielberg movie series some years ago. I think that's the most fascinating era of Spielberg's career, when he was dissecting more of a darkness in his usual palette, I guess.
Yeah.
A movie like AI, which obviously owes a lot to Stanley Kubrick, there's actually a lot there that owes a lot to David Lynch as well. You might not think of Spielberg and Lynch as being in a similar camp, if you will, but there are times where I think Spielberg does owe a lot to David Lynch, so much so that he even cast him in one of his most recent movies,
for sure,
in one of the best scenes of his latest movies.
And I agree. To finish that thought, though, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I do want to finish that sentiment, because the reason I bring up Spielberg, the reason I bring up the idea that Spielberg is not really what he seems to be on the surface, because there is kind of this dark underbelly to his films, despite that sentimentality legacy.
Yeah.
David Lynch is the complete antithesis. His visuals are often strange and challenging and obscure, borderline horrific and harrowing, but underneath the veneer of what we see on the surface is an artist that is deeply sentimental. And I find that fascinating. Such an incredible dichotomy, those two, that, to your point, they don't seem like they have a lot in common, but honestly, I think they do. They just approach that.
There's kind of a yin and yang there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I find that really compelling.
Which is interesting, because Spielberg, being known as the sentimentalist of the two by description, I guess, two of David Lynch's movies have perhaps made me cry more than most of Spielberg's own films. Which is, and that's not a usual reaction I have to a David Lynch film. Those two films, which I'll talk about later, are perhaps outliers in his filmography in some ways. But they still carry the Lynchian code in a very unique way as well. And yet there's an emotional core to those films that I don't think any other filmmaker would be able to tap into. And I think that's what makes David Lynch, kind of like you're saying, a bit of a secret sentimentalist in some way.
Yes.
Thematically speaking, what his films are going for and the way he tries to puzzle his audience is something he cares about deeply. There's a real sincerity in that, and maybe that does come from a sense of sentimentality, as you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I find so fascinating about Lynch, because again, you watch his films and they are deeply weird and strange and avant-garde, and we certainly love his films for that. But David Lynch wanted us to feel cinema. He wanted to let our intuition be the driving force as far as how we reacted to them. And he talked about this a lot, in the sense that art didn't need to be explainable. He wanted to invoke interpretation. He wanted you to feel the movie more so than think about it too deeply analytical. Perhaps some of that simultaneously. And I think that's somewhat of the irony of this conversation, because there was an interview where he said, after the ideas come, and this is a direct quote, after the ideas come, you work so hard to get this thing built, all the elements to feel correct, the whole to feel correct, in this beautiful language called cinema. And the second it's finished, people want you to change it back into words, which is what we're doing here. We are talking about him and his work vocally here, because this is a podcast after all. That's
we have no choice but to do that. But at the same time, it's interesting.
But that's what's so interesting, is that, you know, as much as we try to articulate it, what he's saying there is sometimes you can't. Cinema is a visual language that is meant to be felt. And that is the beauty of his work. You can watch Mulholland Drive or Eraserhead and walk away going, don't understand a lick, but I loved it. And I think that's exactly what he wants. Like, he would deeply appreciate that.
But only certain filmmakers can get away with that, right? Very few can get away with that. David Lynch is one of them that could. Otherwise, we might criticize films for just simply trying to do that, and we might find that frustrating. But for some reason, David Lynch's films do that very thing, and we reward him for it, because it goes back to, I think, that sincerity and that sentimentality that he's trying to provoke in all of us. And he knows that. I remember owning a copy of the Mulholland Drive DVD way before the Criterion release ever came out. And in that DVD case was a piece of paper that said, 10 clues from David Lynch, how to decipher Mulholland Drive. And I'm reading through these clues. I don't remember any of them offhand, but I just remember having this reaction. None of these seem relevant. I think he's trolling us.
He might be. He probably was.
But that just seems like a very Lynchian thing to do, right? And I think that that plays into why his approach does end up getting rewarded, because it's very knowing and very sincere in that approach.
Yeah. Here's another quote that I love that amplifies what we're talking about here, where he says, quote, "Cinema is a language. I'm not always good with words. Some people are poets and have a beautiful way of saying things with words. But cinema is its own language, and you can express a feeling and thought that can't be conveyed any other way. It's a magical medium." And end quote there. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly who he was. And I think that is the great things or the great thing about his movies. And you're right. I think other filmmakers who try to do this perhaps can sometimes get too caught up in trying to make the film obscure simply for the sake of provocation. But
exactly. Yeah.
That's not who David Lynch is. Everything he's done, at least of the films I've seen, I admittedly haven't seen all of them yet, but of those I've seen, there is a grand purpose to it. Like, I just watched Eraserhead for the first time, not for the first time in a long time, since college. And when you watch it when you're 19 years old, it probably is a little bit of that. I have no idea what's happening here. And not to say that you have to be in a certain mindset or a certain age or era of your life to understand Eraserhead. That's not what I'm saying. But I think as a 19-year-old, you might walk into Eraserhead and come away not knowing what to experience or what to expect or how to interpret it. I will say I have not seen the film in a long, long time. Watching it now, and some of it is certainly through maturing as an adult and a cinephile over the last 12 years. That is a big part of it for sure. The other thing with that movie specifically is I'm also now a parent. And
I was just going to say
that on the other side of parenthood, holy Lord, it just erupts with a different wave of emotion. And I think what's interesting about that film is it is quintessential to what we're talking about. I cannot explain everything about Eraserhead analytically. I felt the movie though.
You felt it. That's a huge
fears,
difference.
its paranoias, its frustrations, its love. I felt it deeply, and that's as far as my review goes.
There are so many movies of David Lynch's that I think you can describe as nightmarish. That's definitely one of his visual and tonal trademarks in a way. I mean, all of his movies have that because of his trademark surrealism and how that's kind of funneled through this neo-noir, almost horror-like backdrop. But I feel like out of all of his movies, Eraserhead is the one I would call maybe the most nightmarish. And I think it's because it stems from maybe the most relatable of places for his audience to grasp onto. Because a lot of his movies in the 2000s, for instance, maybe tapped into a more specific sense of place, like Hollywood, for instance. So it maybe has more of a, it's maybe using art and artists as sort of a cipher for that. But to your point with Eraserhead, that is in many ways a movie about the fears of becoming a parent, the monster that you're giving birth to, right? The monster that you're creating. And I've heard that interpretation from many people who have become a parent and how they've seen that movie in a different way because of that. I think that is one of his better films for sure.
I agree. I absolutely love that film. And yeah, I mean, it might be, honestly, I don't know. I say this at the risk of sounding extremely pretentious, but you know, it's David Lynch. I think that's just going to come with the territory with some of these films, you know, because some people might walk away from Mulholland Drive going, I think I have a handle on it. And maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah, I sure don't. I love that I don't.
For all of its obscurity, might be the film that I have the handle on the most. And maybe it is simply being a parent and knowing, or again, experiencing those paranoias and fears. And, you know, sometimes your baby comes out looking like a weird monster, you know, that could certainly be a reflection of your experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, either way, again, the fears and the paranoias that are there. And I don't know if that's exactly what Lynch was going for, because he doesn't explain anything, and that's why we love him.
He may have just thought, I want this woman to give birth to a weird baby.
It could have been as simple as that.
Yeah.
It might not go any deeper than that for Lynch, but as a parent, you like what he throws to the characters and the horror of that film, it is very, very resonant as a parent. And so like I certainly I feel like I've again, for all of its weirdness, I feel like that's the one that has resonated the most with me at the very least.
Okay.
Not to say that it's his best film, but again, like that's just the one that I have the clearest picture of. Whereas some of these others, for a variety of reasons, are still ones that I'm wrestling with, that I love, that I deeply, deeply admire, but I don't know.
But you're waiting to get more out of, because they'll reveal themselves more without revealing everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess at that point, based on what you've seen thus far, do you think Eraserhead might be your favorite, or is that a very dumb question to even ask?
It might be.
Yeah, because I'm looking at my rough ranking here just to get a little bit ahead of you, and I'm thinking, okay, I mean, Dune is probably my least favorite film of his, just given the circumstances of how that was made.
Yeah.
It's hard to really put that above much else, but I think regardless, it's still a very fascinating relic of 1980s sci-fi that I think has more good qualities than not. It's a very interesting movie, but I feel like everything else is essentially tied for first place in a weird way, because it really does depend on what's more top of mind, maybe what you have more of a grasp on at that present moment, and what you're just in the mood for, because there was an early period of Lynch that feels a little distant from later Lynch. And I think that is a very interesting thing, and why his filmography is so fascinating.
I agree. I mean, I don't know if I have a ranking per se. There are a few blind spots here. That is part of it. I need to catch up on some of these. I haven't seen Fire Walk with Me, for example, because I don't have a lot of time for TV. So it's something that I struggle with. I mean, even modern television, I don't really have a chance to really see all the time.
Me too.
Like I've seen like the first 10 episodes of The Bear, and that's it. Like that's all that I've seen. Like it comes in waves, and I just don't have time for it. But with everything I'm doing, it's either film or television, and obviously
Same here, man.
Film.
Same here.
So I haven't seen Twin Peaks, and therefore I haven't seen Fire Walk with Me. Perhaps, given the circumstances, I might find myself inspired to dig a little deeper to find the time to see Twin Peaks if I can, to catch up with it, because I do love David Lynch. And The Elephant Man is one I also need to catch up with.
Okay.
So
I would be very, very curious to see what you think of The Elephant Man. Like if you want my recommendation of what to prioritize, I'd say that one. Again, ranking his films, it's a futile exercise. But maybe to go back to the way you described your relationship with Eraserhead, the film of his that I feel like I've always had the most of a grasp on, and maybe the one that moves me the most, is The Elephant Man. And that was one of those movies I saw at a younger age. It was kind of one of those formative films for me. So there's a good chance I may always see that as my favorite of his. But I also admit it's kind of an outlier in his filmography. It's not Lynchian in the way that you would normally describe a David Lynch film. But I think because of that, he taps into this idea of empathy in a way that I think no other filmmaker ever could. And that's all evident in The Elephant Man. That's one of those films that made me cry like a weirdo. I'll just open up and say that right now.
Okay. Now I'm curious to go and catch up with that one. I've been obviously I've been on a David Lynch kick this week, as many of us, if not all of us, have to some degree or another. So I'll probably get to that within the next week or so.
Okay.
And we'll report back on how I what my experience was, because I everything that I've seen, I have fallen in love with. Blue Velvet is another one that I deeply admire. And similarly to something like Mulholland Drive, I can't sit here and confidently say, sure, I know exactly what he was going for with every scene in that film. I do love that Blue Velvet is deeply weird. It takes these strange turns that you just don't expect. It's one of those films where on the surface, it feels familiar. And this is the magic trick of Blue Velvet and something like Mulholland Drive. I think Mulholland Drive does this as well, where there are tropes, there's tone that you can easily recognize, right? Blue Velvet is a film noir murder mystery in many respects. Okay, I can wrap my head around that.
Same.
It's also this psychological horror. Okay, I can wrap my head around that. But with his storytelling and editing, it just, and even performatively, I think of something like Dennis Hopper in that film, there are things that happen that go, wait, this is not how this is supposed to work.
Dennis Hopper, really interesting actor, another one that we lost too soon for sure.
Yeah.
But I think about him in Blue Velvet and then him in Speed, two very different films, but he's probably two of the freakiest and scariest bad guys I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's incredible. And borderline cartoonish, and it shouldn't work. It almost shouldn't work. Him and his cronies, how tonally jarring they are to, let's say, the scenes between Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern, and how tender and poignant and grounded those moments are. Or even as we see MacLachlan in the apartment trying to understand the mystery and like everything that's happening in those scenes, again, it taps into a grounded psychological horror familiarity in terms of the film language that again you recognize, that you're compelled by, and then Lynch would just take this immediate left turn into something completely unexpected, and you're like, what is happening here? And it's absolutely engrossing.
It's exciting. That is an exciting movie, Blue Velvet. I mean, Mulholland Drive is as well, but Blue Velvet I feel like that's the turning point in many ways. That's where I feel like David Lynch was developing his usual surrealistic trademarks that we tend to associate with most of his filmography. Blue Velvet is basically sort of the early stages of a Mulholland Drive like film, or an Inland Empire, or a Lost Highway, for instance. That's, I don't want to call it a trial run because I feel like that's underselling it. I think Blue Velvet is, if I were forced to rank his filmography, that's probably top 3 for me. I really do love Blue Velvet. But
I loved it too. I absolutely adore it a lot.
Yeah. But it does feel like that's when he was finally getting a grasp on the filmmaker he was going to become.
I agree. I agree. I think if I had to pick a top 3, it would be Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive. That would be my 3.
It's a good 3.
I need to see The Elephant Man and perhaps give another rewatch to Inland Empire. I didn't love it the first time I saw it, but
yeah, that's fair.
There's so much going on with that film. And I don't know, I don't think I was in the right headspace for
It's a long movie too.
It's a long movie. It might be his longest. It's maybe even more experimental than some of his other films, and that's saying something.
It is, yeah. A lot of people talk about that classic jump scare from Mulholland Drive at the diner, but I think Inland Empire has his 2 biggest jump scares, both involving Laura Dern in some way. I think, from what I recall, Inland Empire is a movie I do need to revisit. I do remember thinking that movie had some of David Lynch's highest highs, but also most of his lowest lows. I think, it's kind of like as a film, fair. I don't think it's quite as it doesn't quite have that total experience that it doesn't seem to work in totality when compared to some of these other films, is all I'm trying to say.
And I agree. That was my experience watching that as well. However, since his passing and people have been talking about him, I've seen a lot of people, our peers, other critics, really go to bat for that film, and it makes me wonder if there's just something about it that I missed. And maybe I was just on the wrong headspace. I don't know. But I'd be curious to give that one a go and to see if I would come around on it in a different way. I am curious.
Same here.
So, we'll see. But yeah, those 3, though, Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, and Blue Velvet, I'd say those are my top 3. I would love to give Wild at Heart another go because that's another one I really like. And perhaps I'll come around further on that film on a rewatch. To your point earlier, a lot of these films, they register and they just kind of sit and you have to kind of waft on it for a while.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then whatever's more top of mind is really just the one that you would call your favorite in that moment. Like, for instance, I'm actually a bit higher on Lost Highway than most of these other ones. And I think a lot of that is because it involves a jazz musician. So I think there's some type of element that I just find relatable to me personally. And I there are thrilling moments there for sure that I also really like. I cannot wait to revisit The Straight Story, as we're going to be having our 1999 retrospective pretty soon. And that film came out in 1999. And that's another one of his films, that and The Elephant Man, that made me cry more than most other films have ever had.
The Straight Story is one I was probably going to give another go really soon as well, partially because of our 1999 retrospective is coming out. It might be my first film into that exercise.
Okay.
So I might just end my David Lynch rewatching.
David Lynchathon, yeah.
my
there you
Lynchathon, yeah. I might just end it with The Straight Story. And I've seen a lot of people talk about how that one might be his most impressive because he is able to maintain his ethos while having to work within the conventions of Walt Disney movie.
It's a Disney movie. Yeah, exactly.
You know, the fact that he is able to get away with what he does by keeping it a David Lynch film, but he has these bars that he can't completely bust out of. That does make it fascinating.
Sure.
So like, so I've seen a lot of people talk about how it's maybe it was his most challenging, most impressive, because
I can see that.
Of how he has to mold that film in a very specific way, without getting too obscure. And I'm going to be looking for that when I give it another go. I'm excited to see if I can see what others are when they're talking about him in that way. So
same here. Great movie.
At any rate, David Lynch, there's really just not much we can say to fully articulate what he means for the world of film. Anyone listening to this, you already know anyway. You're in this space, you're in this world. You know the power of David Lynch, and you know the influence he's had, and how he's revolutionized TV and cinema. Yep. And again, just to reiterate one more time, I love that through all of the strange avant-garde obscurity that he brought to his films, and aesthetically, they are really captivating movies. That he just wanted us to sit in the emotional power that comes from them. Yeah. And that's how I experience movies anyway. So yeah, I'm able to connect with David Lynch in that way.
Yeah, I think you and him would be best friends.
I think so. I think I would have really loved him. I would have loved to go on to Big Boy and had coffee or not, or what is that? Coke and 2 cookies.
Oh, Coke and 2 cookies. There you go. Yeah.
I would have loved to have had that lunch with him. It would have been great.
Oh man. And even, we talked about him as a filmmaker for most of this conversation, as we rightfully should, but this is a man that veered into very different artistic avenues outside of just directing. I mentioned his music career. He's collaborated with other musicians as well. His 2013 album, The Big Dream, is really interesting, and I urge people to go and listen to it if you haven't already. And of course, David Lynch as an actor, whenever he appears in a movie, he's usually the standout thing, right? We obviously can reference The Fabelmans, his most recent appearance, and how crucial it was to that film playing the legendary John Ford. But remember that movie Lucky, I believe it was called, with Harry Dean Stanton? Is that what do you remember that? And I think he had a small part in that as well. And he always talked about his pet turtle at the bar. My, but this is just, what an interesting and charismatic individual as well.
Oh, he was. Yeah, I could have listened to him talk all day long about cinema, the artistic process, what it meant to him. He talked a lot about meditation, how powerful that was. That's how he manifested so many of his ideas. And yeah, it was just really magical to hear him speak about art in that way. Just and really charismatic, really, really great person. And we're certainly going to miss him a lot.
One of the greatest to ever do it.
The last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on. I'll end with this quote, because this is another quote of his that I love. Cinema is a thing that deals with things beyond words, and it's so beautiful. I agree. I agree. Gets to the heart of David Lynch impeccably. So. Which
is a perfect way for us to say we're done talking right now.
We're done talking. We're just gonna feel David Lynch.
Just let the movies and his art not even speak for itself, feel for itself.
Feel for itself. Absolutely. Okay, real quickly before we get to our top 5 this week, we're going to spend a little time talking about award season, but perhaps more specifically, I know later on this week we're going to get Oscar nominations. So on next week's show, we'll certainly have plenty to talk about when it comes to award season and the Oscars. We'll get into the nominations as well, chasing the gold. With the discourse this weekend, I feel like it would be remiss if we did not talk about the current landscape as it relates to AI and movies. Now, I want to start the conversation here because admittedly, when this report dropped, I did have a little bit of a laugh. Not because it is necessarily a laughing matter on its own terms. However, what have we always talked about when it comes to award season? What have we always stated?
Stop turning it into sports.
Exactly. Stop turning art into sports. Art and sports should not collide. However, that's what it is. Award season is sports. And when this news dropped, you know what it reminded me of?
You're going to talk about Ohio State, aren't you?
I'm going to talk about Ohio State. It reminded me of the Ohio State University, because what are they really good at? They are fantastic at dropping these hit pieces at just the right time. At just the right time. They did this a lot last year. In fact, the reason, and sorry to get a little sports nerdy here for a moment.
That's okay.
But it'll make sense. I'll circle around. It'll all make sense here in a moment, so stick with me. Last year, the University of Michigan had a coach by the name of Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
He is no longer at Michigan. You want to know why? Because Ohio State, they played dirty. They play dirty. And I'm not talking about on the field. I'm talking about dropping these hit pieces at the right time to get the right people involved to investigate Jim Harbaugh. And a lot of ways for nothing. For little things. They were not that extravagant, but they were really good at just leaking information to the right people at the right time. And they've done it this year. Just this last week, there was a report, because Ohio State, let me remind you, is about to play for the national championship against Notre Dame. That is happening today as this episode is released. So last week, I was getting ahead of myself. Last week, there was a report that the Notre Dame head coach might be interested in going to the NFL. Oh my gosh. I wonder who leaked that information, whether it's true or not. And look, it's probably not true, but it comes from a legit source that has a platform. And
I wonder who has their hands in that cookie jar.
We all know who's dropping that. Ohio State is leaking information to create a distraction for Notre Dame. And they did this a lot with Michigan last year. They wanted to get Jim Harbaugh gone. So, look, he's suspended for the first 3 games. Oh, boy. Well, they're dominating. They're undefeated last year. So what do? Well, we got to drop more information. And look, there's a Connor Stallions investigation. And throughout that whole thing,
start a narrative.
Ohio State was creating a narrative that would spark an investigation to get rid of Jim Harbaugh. They led that campaign, and it worked. He's gone. He's not in college football anymore because of that. I say all of that to say this hit piece on the Brutalist, can you smell it? Oh, it's the exact same recipe. The exact same recipe. I ain't telling you, whoever ordered this hit piece, I think they went to Ohio State because it has the exact
I wonder
verbatim
if
signifiers.
I wonder if they study that course at Ohio State, if they offer that as a major of, investigative journalistic agendas or whatever you want to call it. They might specialize in that in a way. I think if anything, there are so many semantics here to talk about, and we don't know all of the information to really offer our full opinions on the utilization of generative AI as it relates to these movies, right? And it's probably happening with way more movies than we even know about.
Yeah, it's way more.
Yeah, and there are so many nuances that we need to know before we say things like, "Oh, the brutalist should be disqualified," or "This is no big deal," right? Like there are more nuances here. If anything, what I want to talk about is the timing of this hit piece, like you're mentioning. Like it's
so fascinating, right?
I mean, you can almost say the same thing about the TikTok ban, like we joked about earlier in this episode. Yeah. There's a weird sense of timing to it, not just the short-term ban itself, but the fact that it takes place a day before some other event that I'll leave nameless. Right. So there's a timing effect to that's led to this type of influence that they're looking for. Right. And that's essentially what this is. So if anything, it's the agenda of it. It's the agenda. That's what it is. Yeah.
And that's ultimately why I bring up the Ohio State thing. It's not that, I was being a little facetious and having fun there. This is a tactic. But
it's a tale as old as time too. We've seen this so many times.
Exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it's a tale as old as time. It's nothing new, but it is very indicative of competition, which is what this is. You see this all the time in the sports world. I'm sure you see it a lot in politics as well. I try not to delve too far into politics because at this current time, it is nothing but a nightmare. However, in the sports landscape, you see these kinds of tactics all the time. And that's what this is. This is nothing more than a hit piece to discount the brutalist for whatever reason. I'm not even sure who is behind it. I'm sure some PR team is certainly behind all of this. But
it's those representing Amelia Perez.
Probably. But the interesting thing about that is Amelia Perez is similarly under scrutiny this weekend because
that's a fair point.
That film has used AI to enhance the vocals of some of the performers in that film. So that film is under a lot of heat as well. With The Brutalist, it's a little interesting to simply move away from the sports analogy of it all and just talk about the film itself. To be clear, I don't think AI has there's no reason for it to be involved with art at all. I am not for AI being involved in art. However, I will say this because some people are talking about how The Brutalist using AI, especially as it relates to the accent work for Adrian Brody, how that should perhaps eliminate him from competition when it comes to Best Actor. If that is something you want to have an argument about, that's fine. I guess if I'm going to bring sports back into it for a brief second, that is similar to performance-enhancing drugs with athletes in sports. So I can understand why in the context of sports, in the context of competition, which again is what award season is. That's what the Oscars is. Yeah. I think there's some merit to that argument.
Same.
However,
I agree.
Now removing the sports context of it, and we're just looking about the film and the craft of it, accents are not performances. And I will, maybe not just me, I think a lot of us will die on that hill. However, when it comes to something like the Oscars, the history of the Academy seems to suggest that it's like they do put weight on it.
They do because it's a physicality, right? It's something that they notice very clearly. It's the loudest portion of the performance.
100%. And they love loud performances. They love those transformations. So it's something they do put stock into, which is perhaps why I think, again, in the context of sports, films using AI to enhance an accent, I think we should put stock into that argument.
I agree.
But again, when we move away from all of that, accents do not make performances. Adrian Brody is great in The Brutalist because of the emotionality and the complexity he brings to that character. It's not how his voice sounds. And when I was watching that film, his accent was the last thing on my mind.
Fair. That's fair.
I'm not condoning the use of AI here. I'm just saying that the heart of the performance is in what Brody brings to the role outside of the accent. The accent mattered very, very little to me. And I think he's really great, which is why the use of AI really isn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. There was no reason for him to do it, for the film to do that.
If anything, your point is, once again, condemning just the use of AI in film and artistic making and the artistic process because it serves no purpose in this regard.
Yeah.
So why is it even here in the first place? That's a good point.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be here. Now, counter argument, because someone on Twitter pointed this out and I thought it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How is that any different than, let's say, a reverb on a vocalist in a musical, for example? You know, we had a couple of musicals, A Complete Unknown, Wicked, Better Man. And Better Man is another film that was outed this last weekend for using AI as well. When you put reverb and these effects on a vocalist when they're performing a song in a film, how is that any different than enhancing the accent of a character? I think that is an interesting argument because on its own terms, there's really not a whole lot that's different there. Because you are taking away the raw performance of a singer and you're enhancing it to make it sound good.
I guess in that analogy, though, sorry, I'll let you keep going because I have a different side of that argument. I guess we can also
which is
look
fair.
at too.
I'll be curious to hear what you have to say. Now, I will say this. Here's the difference for me. Here's the difference. If a sound engineer, a human being, a sound designer, was enhancing the vocals of Adrian Brody, I don't think people would have an issue. I don't think people really would care all that much because it doesn't take away from an artist doing their work and being paid for it. The difference in this case is that it wasn't a sound engineer. It was AI doing that work. And to, again, complement my argument here, that is exactly what Emilia Perez is under fire for, as I noted earlier. It wasn't a sound engineer that was putting reverb on the vocals. It was technology. It was AI doing that work. If you put a human being in that place and you pay them for their work and you let the artist do their thing, in this case, a sound designer, I don't think people would care. And I don't think it would be a narrative or a talking point all that much.
Well, I think that right there is the exact difference that I was just about to talk about, and you jumped the gun there. So I appreciate that. Our heads are in similar spaces there because those that work as sound engineers and sound mixers, and I think about it as a musician as well. If you're ever in a recording studio, you have a producer, you have a mixer, you have someone that does the mastering. That is part of the artistic process. It's a technical process, but it is part of the artistic process. They're imbuing it with how they choose to hear it and what they think sounds good. So if I think back, let's say if I think back, I don't know, to a great 1970s or 80s disco album, and I look at, oh, this was produced by Quincy Jones. What did he contribute to that? So like that's part of the artistic process. If AI is involved to do that very thing, then it's a very different thing. Then I think there's more weight to the other side of that argument for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is why personally I don't put too much stock into, well, they shouldn't be nominated for awards. Because you know what is an old school version of this? Editing can do this.
It's
right. Editing can make a great performance look legendary if you have a great editor. you know
well,
what
again,
I mean?
If you have someone actually doing the editing, right?
And you have someone doing the editing, exactly. Because how many stories have you heard about, well, we had to do this, take 500 times, but on the 500th one, we got it right. Mm-hmm. That is all part of the process.
Yeah.
And it's something that has been talked about a lot. Adrian Brody, maybe, again, I'm saying this myopically. I don't know. I obviously wasn't there when they were making the film. But even without the use of AI, maybe the accent wasn't good on the first 400 takes of a scene, but maybe he got it right on the next one. Like, that happens all the time. And that's why oftentimes when you see characters with accents in films, sometimes it can be uneven, because they don't get it right all the time. But this is just a personal thing, and it does depend on the movie and what it's trying to do. I just don't get caught up in those things.
No, I don't either.
Earlier with David Lynch, I'm an emotional person. I want I want the emotional arc of the character to resonate. If that's good, then everything else is, it's all filler. It's all on the outside to me.
I do think there is a fair argument on the other side, and I'm not saying I agree with this argument, but I think there's a fair perspective out there that the use of AI and an accent like this could be seen as too much of a handicap that maybe made the performance more easily able to convey that emotionality. But on the other hand, if the movie still works, I'm not sure if I really care. Really, the problem is the fact that it was AI that was used. And we goes back to our overarching issue with the utilization of AI in movies, and how if it's replacing an artist or someone who's meant to do that job in the first place, then we have a major problem with it. As far as this outcome and this narrative and this agenda that is being thrown out there to make the Brutalists seem less eligible for certain things, I'm not interested in playing that game. I'm really not. That's just a very different thing.
Yeah. We also don't know to what degree they were using this AI.
Exactly. Yeah.
Was it really subtle? Little touches to enhance, or was it a lot? Like, he just couldn't nail the accent, and they really had to use it a lot.
Well, we talked about other movies utilizing AI in some way that we might not even know about. I mean, another example of one that we haven't really condemned for its utilization of AI is something like Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. The way AI was used to match Aaliyah Brown and Anya Taylor-Joy, but then there are arguments that there's actually a difference between how AI is used in that film versus generative AI, which I don't know the semantics of. And apparently maybe AI was used in Furiosa in a way that was still being rendered by an artist. So someone was still doing the work. So if that's the case, that's also very different. There are so many different semantics and different avenues that we just don't know all the information on to have an opinion on that utilization just yet.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding of it, generative AI is when the AI is creating content, creating images based on data that is trained on, whereas systems, tools are simply using AI to help the artist in their creation. It's not generating anything.
Exactly.
It's like Photoshop, for example, using the tools in there to help manipulate an image to whatever the artist is trying
honestly
to do.
it's like Power BI at Microsoft, right? People utilizing that to make Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoints even more visually acceptable, right? That's kind of a similar thing, but there's an analyst actually doing that job still.
Exactly. And that's where I think the Brutalist, more so than the Adrian Brody thing, that doesn't bother me nearly as much, because again, accent work is so low on the list as far as my priorities are concerned. I just don't care unless the accent is like way goofy, like way out of bounds. And even in that context, that kind of depends on what it is. Because, for example, Ridley Scott being in his I don't give a shit era, with something like The Last Duel, I did not care what Ben Affleck was doing. Like, I just did not care at all. I thought it was fun, totally went with it. I thought it was
that
great.
is the charm of that movie. Love it so much.
Now, if that was, a different filmmaker who had different goals in mind, then perhaps it wouldn't have worked. So it is a little bit on a case-by-case basis. But we're, oftentimes we're talking about actors that have elite talent. So the accent work, maybe it is off, by a little bit. And if you're from a certain area where that dialect is being spoken, perhaps that will be disengaging for you. And I think that's perfectly fair and understandable. I'm not trying to diminish that at all. But generally speaking, accent work, I think, is simply there to try to enhance authenticity of a character, but it is not the be-all, end-all. And as long as it's close, but they get the emotion part of it right, I think that is way more important. Now, if they miss badly there and the accent work is off, then I think maybe you're having a little bit of a different conversation.
Well, then maybe this agenda I would say has more weight.
Yeah. I just, like, I care, like, again, going back to Adrian Brody, to me, it is the facial work. It is his outburst in the film. Like, there's it's the way he interacts with other characters. That's the beating heart of that performance. How he sounds is almost irrelevant. The accent is necessary because he's from Hungary and he's living in America. So you do need the accent. I'm not saying get rid of it altogether, but he's good enough of an actor that without the AI, he would have been able to be convincing enough while allowing what he does with everything else to breathe and let that character exist as it was. I just don't think the AI was necessary. With the Brutalist, where they deserve much more criticism, I think, is what we found out that they were using AI for some of the designs.
Yeah, that's bad.
The architecture.
That's bad. Yeah,
now,
that's pretty bad.
That is really bad, especially because, as others have pointed out, their whole campaign for this award season is, we did all of this painstakingly on a $10 million budget. And look at what we created by hand.
But it's not even that. It's the beauty of the architectural designs in that movie as being something that was designed mentally by a human being, right?
Yeah.
So like that idea there, the fact that if those were designed by generative AI in some way, really diminishes the impact that those structures have in that movie for me. Because I think there's actually a thematic purpose to how well they're rendered and how well they're, lack of a better term, designed. Like, that's part of the movie in many ways.
Now, to my understanding, we're talking about small details here.
Sure. Not the full scope of it.
The full scope of it.
Yeah.
But still, the irony of what you're pointing out, given what the film is about, I do think that is a part of it. And they've been on the campaign circuit talking about how this is a real movie with real craftsmanship. You know, we're not doing the silly CGI nonsense from Hollywood. Like, that's right. I'm obviously being a little facetious there, but that's how they've been talking about this movie on a $10 million budget. Look at what we did for $10 million. Well, when you're using AI to enhance some of these details here, that's going to save you a lot of money. And that's how you get perhaps some of the scope and scale that you get here on $10 million.
Sure.
So that does diminish a lot of what they've been saying in that regard. But again, it doesn't seem as if it's a large thing, that they only used it for like small details. That, at least that's my understanding of it.
Right.
So it doesn't totally take away from the Brutalist. I don't think it's something that completely just washes out the work altogether. However, the fact that they were using it in that way, it does sting a little bit.
Yeah.
That is a little unfortunate. Sure.
I have to agree with that, unfortunately. And because, like I said, it does affect the thematic intrigue of that movie and the purpose that movie is certainly offering.
Yeah. I still love it, but that, again, is really unfortunate. And
yeah,
I think we're at a crossroads here, and I think part of this conversation also exists under the banner of at what point are we just going to have the conversation of, this is what Hollywood is doing, this is what these filmmakers are doing, and to your point, as we started this conversation, it's probably way more prominent than we even know. A lot of films are using it to some degree or another.
Yeah.
And when you couple that with financing, movie financing these days, and how expensive it is, at what point is AI going to be such a big part of it? Because you're able to get your movie greenlit under the condition that you're using AI to help cheapen the cost for X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
As artists and as cinephiles who love engaging with said art, I think we are going to have to reckon with that, because it is not going away. It is not going away at all. And how are we going to respond to that?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
Are we going to accept it? Are we going to be criticizing it continuously? This is why we need to know the nuances and the semantics of how it's being utilized.
And that's why I really hope, and I don't think this is going to happen until after the Oscars is over.
Right.
But for the brutalist, I would love for them to be transparent about it, because, and again, I'm not condoning the use of AI here. Generally, I think it should go away. It's just not going to. That's the reality of the world we live in.
Absolutely.
But if all they're doing is using AI to enhance small details, the bulk of the architecture was built by human beings. Almost all of it. We'll say 95%.
Yep.
But they needed to enhance details and textures that they don't have the budget for, because we're working on $10 million and we need AI to enhance some of those small details. If that's all it is, I won't get too angry about it. I don't love it, but if 95% of it is built by artists and craftsmen,
if it's not taking jobs away,
and it's not taking jobs away, again, we're only talking about small details we don't have the budget for.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are worse sins. There are worse sins.
There are plenty of worse sins. Yeah, for sure. I
So
agree with that.
I mean, that's all I'm saying. I don't think that takes away from how grand and imposing and spectacular that film is. I still think it's one of the best films of the year. Is that unfortunate? Yeah. But those two things can be mutually exclusive.
Sure. Yeah. We're open-minded in this podcast. We know how to separate the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else to add to that?
No, just don't take people's jobs away when you do this.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, Brennan, let's talk about coffee. I love it.
You need it. So good.
You need
so
it.
good.
It's great this time of year.
That great warm cup it fits the season, it fits the mold, and man, we love when it tastes good and it's made ethically, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you live in one of the northern states and you're feeling the wintry weather, you're going to need a warm cup of coffee. And that's why we love Coffee Cult, because not only do they source specialty grade coffee, they do it ethically. They make sure it comes from farms that are doing the right things.
Yep.
And we're talking about high-end gourmet coffee. This isn't the stuff that you buy at the store for $3 a bag and it tastes like they scraped it off of the bottom of someone's boot. That's not what this is. This is high-end coffee where you can taste exquisite, lush notes in the coffee on its own. You don't need to add anything to it. Like, for example, I love the Holiday Blend. It's not available right now. But with the Holiday Blend, like, you can really taste like the chocolate, earthy notes that comes with it. It's the nutmeg in it. It's really, really great. Or you can get something like the IPE is what it's called, and that is a really fruity coffee. Like, you can taste vibrant notes of strawberries and blueberries. The Harar is the same thing. Like, I love that Ethiopian Harar, man. They know how to
It's a good one.
farm coffee over there. And
They really do up there, for sure.
Really, really good coffee. So yeah, this is really, really good stuff. You don't need to add coffee or sugars and milks and all that sort of stuff to this.
No, you're getting coffee. You're actually getting coffee with this. Yeah,
absolutely. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K. At checkout for now, use the code ISF24. That is going to change very soon since we're in 2025. But for now, the code for this week, ISF24. Make sure you use that code and you'll get 15% off your order at checkout. Again, that's 15% off. The code is ISF24, coffeecult.com, coffee with the K, call with the K. I promise you're going to love the coffee. It is terrific stuff. Really, really great. Perfect for this time of year. And we thank them for their support.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to The top 5. We're going to talk about our most anticipated films of the year.
We're moving away from 2024. We are no longer allowed to talk about 2024.
All right. Now, before we get into our top 5, I do want to ask you if you had any sort of criteria here. And what I really mean is, are there any films that you left off because, you know, we've talked about a few of these
they didn't come out in like, what, 2021 when they may have should have come out?
Yeah.
I'm calling this my Mickey 17 honorable list. I am not including Mickey 17 at the very least. I can tell you right now, my current top 10, which admittedly is in a very big state of flux. I'm not even sure if my top 10 is really locked in. But these movies, I don't recall us ever really talking about, or at least I don't recall ever really talking about on a previous most anticipated list, maybe a year ago or even 2 years ago. So I feel like we're going to be talking about a lot of new films. And I say that to say, with relation to my list not really being that set in stone, I guess, there's actually a lot to look forward to in 2025. I was doing a lot of research in preparation for this, and 2025 looks pretty damn stacked. If everything comes out that is perhaps either scheduled or estimated to come out this year, this is going to be a year for movie going. It really does seem like a good one. And I my list right now has almost 40 movies that I think are worth at least acknowledging. I'm not sure how big yours is, but I think 2025 looks like it could be a very exciting time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this could be a really phenomenal year. I am curious how it's going to differentiate itself from 2024. We talked about how last year was such a unique year for movies. This year, I think if 2025 hits, it might be closer to 2023 in terms of how
just like quality and how much there,
and how deep it could be. Absolutely. And I am excited to talk about some of those here. You mentioned Mickey 17. I do have that on my list here as an honorable mention because it was my number 9 most anticipated film of last year as well. So it was in my top 10. There are 2 other films I need to note here as well. The documentary biopic from Kirsten Johnson, Sontag, starring Kristen Stewart. That was my number 3 of last year. Number 3 of 2024. From doing a little bit of research, it doesn't even seem as if that film is coming out in 2025 either. but
you talked about it already, so yeah, it's a film that we're both still looking forward to.
Just in case it does come out, it is an honorable mention. However, that film is still in pre-production. They have not even begun filming. That might be a 2026 release, so we might even mention it again next year.
You might be right.
And then my last film here, my number 1 for the last 2 years straight on a true list is
Malikian,
Terrence
baby.
Malick. the Way of the Wind.
We know this is coming out in 2042, so we'll have to wait quite a bit.
I do want to read this. I thought this was incredible. This is from the Film Stage. They had their top 100 most anticipated films of 2025. This is what they have The Way of the Wind as number 2 on their list for this year. But this is what they said, and I love this. Landing on this list for a 5th straight year. A 5th straight year, thereby setting some kind of record, for better or worse, in a film for which excitement's never once reduced. Malick began shooting The Way of Wind in 2019, and per sources found editing hobbled by the pandemic. But one assumes praise in obscure voiceover that times finally come for his interpretation of the Christ tale. I love that. I love that so much.
For the 5th straight year, you could just tell whoever's writing that, the facetious voice is coming through in that writing there. You could just feel it. You could feel it.
And that's exactly where I'm at. Like, what they wrote there is how I feel. Landing on this list for a 5th straight year is Terrence Malick. Yes.
Here we go again.
We've talked about this film in particular for at least 2, if not 3 years. So we're not that far removed from the Film Stage in that regard. So Terrence Malick, I have left off my list. It is an honorable mention.
Okay.
But yes, on a true list, it would probably still be my number 1 because it's Terrence Malick. but who knows if it's coming out. As they noted in their little write up there, we pray and voiceover that it does come out this year. So
yep, absolutely.
All right. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into our top 10 or our top 5. We're going to talk about our top 5. We'll reveal our top 10 here at the end of this.
Yep.
Brendan, your number 5.
All right. Well, and like I said, this is very much in a state of flux. There's a lot of fluctuating happening here. My 5 right now, as far as what I'm really anticipating, could ultimately change depending on new news that we get since releasing this episode, maybe new trailers that come out that showcase different tones that these movies could be offering. But as of now, just based on what we think is coming out and what I know these movies are about, my number 5 most anticipated is actually a documentary. It's a documentary called Sly Lives, and it's from Questlove, the same director as Summer of Soul, or for the full title being Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, which depicted the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969. That was a great
doc. Love that.
Great doc. But this documentary is strictly about the band Sly and the Family Stone, who were also featured in that documentary, Summer of Soul. They were one of the performers at the Harlem Cultural Festival, and their performance was probably the highlight of that entire movie. One of the most electrifying rock performances, not even rock, soul, jazz, R&B, funk. It's one of the most epic fusions of pretty much every genre of that time period that I think this band represented. And I'm really excited to see what Questlove is going to do with this band and what he is willing to showcase about Sly Stone himself. So this documentary, Sly Lives, I think it comes out in February. And yet I haven't really seen much about it as far as any footage, any confirmations around it. But this is something that's very much a Brendan pick. I love Sly and the Family Stone. And I cannot wait to see what Questlove has up his sleeve for it.
I love this. This is why Brendan is amazing, because he has these great finds. I didn't even realize this was coming out this year, but for all those reasons, I have added it to my list here. I'm very, very excited for this. It will have its world premiere at Sundance, which is happening very, very soon. In fact, as this episode is released, within the next few days, because I think the festival begins on the 23rd, or somewhere around there. So this will have its premiere very soon, and then, as Brendan noted, it's going to be released on February 13th on Hulu.
All right, less than a month. Heck yeah.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. That is really, really great to hear. All right, my number 5. In some ways, I'm kind of, I've surprised myself that this isn't higher on my list, but it goes to demonstrate what you were saying earlier as far as how great of a year this could be.
Yeah.
And number 5 for me is Lynn Ramsey.
Die My Love, baby.
Freaking Ramsey. Yep. Die My Love. Oh my gosh. I am looking forward to this. 8 years. 8 years between You Were Never Really Here and Die My Love. That is way too long, but I am very, very excited to have Lynn Ramsey back on the cinematic table. I cannot wait to eat this up. It stars Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. Are you kidding me? Absolutely. It also has Lakeith Stanfield, Sissy Spacek, Nick Nolte in the film as well.
What a cast. What a cast. If we're ranking our most anticipated films of the year just based on their casts, this is one of the top ones, I think.
So good. The premise: in a farmhouse on the Montana countryside, a woman has mental health issues as her marriage breaks up. If that doesn't scream Lynn Ramsey, I don't know what does. That has her written all over this film. That is an amazing premise. I cannot wait to dive into this movie. Die My Love. Lynn Ramsey. So happy to have her back. It is my number 5.
This is where my top 10 is in such a state of flux, because at this point now I don't have it in my 10. But it could very there are so many movies I'm looking forward to right now. This, like I said, this is one of the most stacked lists that I think we've ever had as far as looking ahead to a particular year, because so many of our favorite filmmakers are releasing movies this year, or at least tentatively scheduled to release movies this year as of this recording. And this cast and this premise is so up Lynn Ramsey's alley. It feels so in keeping of the late grief-stricken Lynn Ramsey of "You Were Never Really Here" and "We Need to Talk About Kevin" fame. Like, I could really sense that synopsis coming from that same mind, and I really look forward to how this one's going to portray those ideas, especially given that cast there. Yeah, this is another one I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see this. It is an adaptation of a 2017 French novel, and I don't know if Lynn Ramsey is going to maintain the exact same details from the novel into her film. However, from my understanding, the novel specifically examines postpartum depression. Again, I don't know if that's what Lynn Ramsey is going to explore here, because the official synopsis just says a woman with mental health issues. However, if it is postpartum depression, that I do think is a fascinating topic for a horror film, a psychological horror that Lynn Ramsey is really great at. Because, and I'm sure a lot of people can attest to this, it is a really bizarre experience. Yeah. Obviously, I didn't experience it myself, but I saw firsthand. And my wife is very, very chill, relaxed, easy to get along with. She did have postpartum depression when our first son was born. Completely different person. It was one of the more surreal experiences of my life.
Sure.
That is no joke. Absolutely.
I get it. Yeah, absolutely.
And if anyone can tackle that, it's going to be Lynn Ramsey. She's going to absolutely nail it.
I think so. She's kind of an expert at what she does in that regard.
She is.
Yeah.
All right. Die My Love, my number 5. What do you got at your number 4?
All right. Number 4. This was always going to be in my top 5 in some way, just given that this filmmaker is one of my guys. Anytime this man is about to make a film in any year, it's going to be one of my most anticipated, and that's the great David Lowery. So let's talk about Mother Mary.
I was wondering if this was going to make your list. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, Mother Mary, this could have been higher on my most anticipated list, but granted, there's still a lot about it that we don't know just yet. I think aside from its cast and its overall premise being described as this epic melodrama of sorts about a musician and her relationship with this fashion designer. We know Anne Hathaway's in it. We know that the music will once again be scored by Daniel Hart, David Lowery's usual collaborator. One of the most underrated composers working today. I think you would agree with that. But the music is also going to be apparently co-supervised by Charlie XCX and Jack Antonoff, which is really interesting. So there's going to be a musicality to this movie, probably even more so than David Lowery's other films. But yeah, aside from that, aside from a still image that we have of Anne Hathaway in the movie, we don't know a whole lot about it yet, which is why I didn't quite rank it higher. But after Peter Pan and Wendy, with David Lowery working within the studio system and it not quite working as well as it did before, I'm glad to see him returning to his own self-finance roots, I guess, where he can make a movie in his own way. So I'm looking forward to it for those reasons, and just simply the fact that he's one of my guys. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, no, I love David Lowery as well. I'm very much looking forward to this. It is a strong honorable mention. Not quite in my top 10, but probably just on the outside. And I'm completely there with you. I love David Lowery, and I love how he works within that conventional structure of one for them, one for me kind of thing.
Sure.
And he's now on the one for me, right? He did Peter Pan and Wendy.
Yep.
He made Disney happy with that one, and however that turned out. Now he's on the one for me, and this is where I think he thrives. Nothing against his one for thems. But I think this is where we see David Lowery at his best, is when he's in the I'm doing this for me. And Mother Mary, I'm very, very excited for it.
I mean, he is a very interesting one for them, one for me trajectory, because he's done 2 movies that are arguably ones that you'd call ones for them. Those being Disney, right? Pete's Dragon and Peter Pan and Wendy. Yet they feel so distant from each other as far as how they function as a one for them, right? Because Peter Pan and Wendy, I feel like, is the one that feels most compromised by the way Disney currently operates. Whereas Pete's Dragon is almost like Disney gave him a blank check to make his own movie that they were just going to distribute, which is it's very different in that way. I still think Pete's Dragon's his best movie. And that's a weird thing to say.
Yes,
that
it is.
That is my favorite of his. That is still my favorite movie of his, with a ghost story
Okay.
following that one. But I love seeing him, or I love hearing the idea that he's returning more to those ghost story Green Knight sensibilities for something once again.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I'm not trying to diminish his One for Thems. I'm with you. I really like Pete's Dragon a lot. I certainly don't like it as much as you do. Wouldn't say that it's his best work or one of my favorite films of 2016. I do admire you for that, for your championing of that film.
Top 10 of 2016 for me. I love it.
I do really like Pete's Dragon, and I like Peter Pan and Wendy more than a lot of others. I think I did not completely hate it. So, like, when he's working for the studios, I think he's perfectly capable of delivering a charming, fun little product for them. But I do think, and I hate to sound pretentious cinephile here, but I do think when he's working on his own terms with a ghost story, with The Green Knight, I do think he's working on another level. And I love what he's doing visually. I love the symbolism of his films. I love the methodical nature of them. They're often reflective and poignant, and that's what I love about David Lowery. And that's what I'm excited for Mother Mary, because again, we're on the other side of the Peter Pan and Wendy's, the Disney side of it. Yeah. Although he did just get done working on the television side for Disney as well, so the man's making his money.
He is.
But I am excited for Mother Mary and what this is going to be. And it's got a nice little cast, and
for sure.
I can't wait to see how it unfolds.
Yep, sure. Absolutely.
All right. My number 4, I'm going to another filmmaker that I really, really love. That is the great, the amazing Park Chan-wook. No other choice. Right.
He's got another movie coming out.
Yep. Do love this. I know that it was shot. They began principal photography last August. So this is a film that we should see. It'll probably come out in the fall season, I would venture. I wouldn't be surprised if this maybe even makes its way to Cannes in May. I don't know if that is happening for sure. I'm just kind of speculating there. However, Park Chan-wook, I mean, what can you say about the man? He is working on a level that few other filmmakers are. Not just in terms of his entire resume, but even recently, Decision to Leave, one of the very best films of 2022. His previous before that, The Handmaiden, was one of the best films of its year as well. I even like Stoker quite a lot as well. I think what he's been doing in the last 10 years has been quite phenomenal. This is a movie about a man who engages in a desperate hunt for new employment after being fired from a position that he's held for 25 years. That sounds like a premise that he's going to be able to tackle immaculately. I'm very, very excited for this. I think beyond just what the film could be based off the premise, its teaser poster is admittedly really compelling as well.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
But Park Chan-wook, there's just very few filmmakers are working on his level right now. So I have to have this in my top 5. It's my number 4 here.
This is currently my number 9. Again, influx could change, because anytime Park Chan-wook has a new film coming out, I'm going to be first in line to see it. This current era of Park Chan-wook is really great. He's made so many great films I'm not saying this as a way to diminish the others, but I think my 2 favorite films of his are his 2 most recent, and that's The Handmaiden and Decision to Leave.
Who could blame you? They're really terrific movies.
Yeah, that's why I say that carefully, as if to not diminish other movies that he has made before that, because I think he is very much on a ball, or on a roll, I should say. But there's something about this new era that has this weird sophistication and eroticism that I just find so unique, and I cannot wait to see him do this once again. So yeah, this is easily one of my most anticipated of the year.
Yeah, love it. Cannot wait to see what he has cooked up. Let's move on to number 3. What do you got at number 3?
So my number 3, if there was ever a theme to dissect from last year, 2024, and we talked about this during our award show and our top 10 show, we talked a lot about not just little indie movies, but also this idea of how movies can be big, but not so big, right? Movies that operate on a limited budget by comparison to the Disney, Marvel, superhero, Star Wars of it all, but still have this big, epic, tangible, and visceral quality to them. And my number 3 is the film that I feel the most excited about that could represent that for 2025, at least early on in the year, and that's Ryan Coogler's Sinners.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like this could be that type of thing for 2025, at least kickstarting that very type of thing. This very much feels like it has the excitement factor of a blockbuster, but doesn't feel as big as a blockbuster normally is. This is Brian Coogler once again reuniting with Michael B. Jordan, as well as Michael B. Jordan. He's playing 2 roles here. I don't really know much about this, but I know some people have described it as kind of a From Dusk Till Dawn type of thing. Apparently it is this horror like Western set in the South. I guess it might have vampires in it. I don't really know.
That's what people are saying. It's a vampire movie.
Yeah, which hell yeah. That's my description for this. Hell yeah, I'm signing up for this. This sounds incredible. And part of the reason why I have it ranked as high as I do is we also have a trailer to back it up, and it's a really good trailer. And so that does add to this for me, and why I have it ranked so highly, because I feel like there's some context that even adds to the excitement even further. So yeah, really cool stuff here.
Ryan Coogler working again with Michael B. Jordan. Enough said. That is enough to garner so much interest for me. And then you're telling me it's a vampire horror film? Are you kidding me? Absolutely.
Heck yeah,
I could not wait for this. Haley Steinfeld also in this.
Yeah.
Jack O'Connell. Yeah, really good cast. I cannot wait to see this as well. I'm so excited to see Ryan Coogler outside of Marvel once again. I really enjoyed what he did within the Marvel system. But yeah, there is something special about him as an artist that obviously we've talked about a lot on the show over the years, and his collaborative efforts with Michael B. Jordan are always home runs. So I'm very, very excited to see this as well. Yeah. Really great honorable mention for me.
And apparently being shot on film since Fruitvale Station. So that's a very exciting thing too. Visually speaking, when I saw that trailer, I thought, this looks like something we all need to see. This looks incredible. So yeah, really, really excited for this one.
Okay, my number 3. I will give you one guess. I think you can probably figure out what my number 3 is going to be. And I'll give you a hint. This is a man that a couple of years ago, some of the best work of his career. Some of the very best work of his career. This is one of my guys. This is one of my guys.
I'm looking at my list of movies I'm most anticipating, and I'm trying to see who here is one of your guys.
One of my guys.
Is it one of my guys too, or is this a filmmaker that's more of a you thing than a me thing?
Nope, this is an us thing. Is it
a filmmaker that's been working for a while?
Yes.
Are you talking about Paul Thomas Anderson?
Nope.
Okay.
But that's a great guess, though.
Okay. So I'm on the right path, I guess. Oh, Steven Soderbergh.
2 films a couple of years ago. Not Soderbergh, although that is another really great guess.
He's got 2 films coming out this year. Yeah.
I'll just go ahead and lay it on you. Wes freaking Anderson.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The
Phoenician Scheme. Now, here's the thing. Generally speaking, I could probably throw Wes Anderson on here because, again, he's one of my guys. We talked about him quite a bit last year, actually, right? Because we did our best of the 2000s.
We did.
Awards as well.
Yeah.
And I love the work that he did in the 2000s. The Royal Tenenbaums, I think, is not just Wes's best movie. I think it's one of the best of the 2000s. It was in my top 10 for best of that decade. And generally, he's one of my favorite filmmakers working today. So I could have him on this list for that reason alone. But no. That's not why he's here at number 3. He's here at number 3 because I need to champion my guy. I got to champion him. Because 2 years ago, he had Asteroid City come out, and he had The Dull Shorts that I think work collectively as one movie. I think they were intentionally meant to be made.
That's an anthology
that
film.
way.
Yeah,
absolutely. those came out and went without much fanfare. Other than some critics like us that championed Wes's work, it's not like we were alone in that. There were some colleagues of ours that very much went for Asteroid City in a big, big way. But generally speaking, it was a more polarized Wes Anderson experience than, let's say, something like the Grand Budapest Hotel, for example.
Agreed.
Or Fantastic Mr. Fox, or even The Royal Tenenbaums. But I'm here to say, I will stand on my pedestal once again. I think Asteroid City is one of his best movies. I think The Doll Shorts as an anthology is one of his best movies.
I love those Doll Shorts so much.
And you couple that with The French Dispatch, which I think is an incredibly underrated. That's another film that came and went without any fanfare in 2021. And Jeffrey Wright deserved an Oscar nomination for his performance in that film. I think this era of Wes Anderson is arguably his best.
Certainly his most reflective. It's his most reflective era. Yeah.
It is a different era for Wes Anderson, despite what you might see aesthetically on the surface. And sure, he's doing his dollhouse aesthetic as always.
Yeah, but it has a different tone this time. It's engaging us in a different way. The emotional cores of those films are very different.
Exactly. He, emotionally speaking, what we've seen from him the last few years is much closer to the Royal Tenenbaums than what we saw through the 2010s, for example. And I am loving it. I am here. I know that it's polarized, and a lot of you listening may not agree with me. That's perfectly fine. But I think this era of Wes is the best that we've seen from him yet. It's a little bit of like Park Chan-wook. Maybe he's also working at such a high level.
Honestly, the way he's working for you is how Park Chan-wook is working for me.
Exactly, I'm with you on that. That's why I had Park Chan-wook at my number 4. So to have Wes on here at number 3, it is not just because of the name and my adoration for him. The reason I have him this high is because I think right now we're seeing the best of Wes, and I'm curious. I'm deeply, deeply curious to see how that may transition with this new film. Like, how does he continue that momentum? If he does continue that momentum, I'm not exactly sure. But as you could expect, the cast is insane. It's insane. It's Benicio del Toro, Michael Cera, Bill Murray, Riz Ahmed, Tom Hanks, Benedict Cumberbatch, Scarlett Johansson, Rupert Friend, who I wanted to mention because I had him as a nominee at the InSession Film Awards a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Willem Dafoe, Bryan Cranston, and the list goes on and on.
And when the trailer comes out, that cast list will be a punchline in the trailer.
It will, of course. It always is. It always is. I don't know how he continues to get all these people working together, but he does.
Yeah.
And it's also an espionage comedy drama thriller, and that's not something that he typically does. So he is branching out a little bit in that regard as well. So a new Wes, a different Wes, but also familiar Wes. I'm very, very excited to see what he does here.
The heist angle of it, the way it seems to be describing itself as, seems to almost remind me of the Fantastic Mr. Fox in a way.
Yeah, sure.
So he has played with that sandbox a little bit. But yeah, anytime Wes has a film coming out, I'm always on board. So I'm very much looking forward to this one as well.
Okay. What do you have at your number 3?
My number 2, you mean? I think we're on number 2.
Oh, number 2, yes. Number 2.
Yeah. Number 2. Yeah, we're
number 2.
We're on our top 2s now. My number 2 is probably the one that I have the most intrigue / curiosity in. This is a film that might not work. This could be a train wreck, but I am so curious as to what the heck Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride is going to be like.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anything, I have this very high because I need to see what is up her sleeve with this reimagining of Bride of Frankenstein featuring Jake Gyllenhaal, Christian Bale, Jesse Buckley, Peter Sarsgaard, John Magaro, Penelope Cruz, Annette Bening, Julianne Hough, I think, is in this as well. Apparently music by Johnny Greenwood. And this is also going to be some type of musical or something.
Yeah.
This has the potential to be the worst movie of the year. But I'm But I'm so intrigued by this. Again, this
Yeah.
kind of goes back to my theme I described with Sinners in my number 3 spot. Movies that maybe don't have the biggest of budgets, but have this bigness to them, this sensibility to them that they are trying new things and they feel like movies once again. This could be another one of those examples. I just have no idea how she's going to pull this off. But I think about it as, I think about it from the perspective of Maggie Gyllenhaal as a filmmaker with her last film, The Lost Daughter, which had a very uncomfortable, thrilling quality to it. I think that weirdly makes sense for this kind of material. So I think that maybe adds to my excitement in a way. I don't know how this is going to work. I have no idea. And that's why I'm excited for it. I need to see what's up her sleeve here.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see this as well. I have this as an honorable mention. And funny enough, I have it listed next to Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which
I
also
did think
comes
about
out this
that.
year.
Also comes out this year, yeah. But this one gets the edge for the curiosity because I feel Frankenstein feels very much like it's up Guillermo del Toro's wheelhouse. Like I feel
For
like,
sure.
yeah, this is. I have no idea how to explain this.
I think that's perfectly fair. I would consider Frankenstein among my most anticipated simply because it's Guillermo del Toro, and obviously we love him. But you are right. There's something so intriguing about The Bride because we don't really know what to expect here with Maggie Gyllenhaal. She's a really great filmmaker, but she hasn't done something quite this ambitious before. It's so intriguing. The marketing that we have seen, there's some images floating out there that are so mesmerizing. I cannot wait to see what this is visually. As you noted, it's somewhat of a musical, supposedly. It has a great cast. She's working with her brother for the first time, maybe ever since Donnie Darko. Was that the last time they worked together, right?
Maybe.
That movie.
Yeah, maybe.
I think Jake has talked about that one of his things that he wanted to do was to work with Maggie again because they haven't worked together since then. And even though she's not starring in this as an actress, I don't think she is anyway, behind the camera. So they are getting to work together, maybe for the first time since that film came out 20 some odd years ago at this point. But that's exciting as well. Yeah, there's just so much to look forward to here. I agree. Like, this is a high honorable mention for me. I'm very, very excited for this.
Intriguing is the word you used, and that's why it's so high for me. That's the perfect way to describe it. So such an intriguing idea.
Yes. I cannot wait. And Jessie Buckley, my girl, it's going to be so exciting to have her back in a big way as the titular bride here. Cannot wait. Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. My number 2 is one of my guys. This is a little bit like Wes Anderson.
Okay.
I could have this film and this filmmaker here because I love the filmmaker. And what he's done has been spectacular to this point. However, there is an extra reason. There's an extra caveat that I wanted to throw up here. Because I think what Kogonada did with After Yang was special.
Oh, talking about that film, big, beautiful journey.
Blew me away. So Kogonada's new film, A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, comes out later this year. I believe it's coming out in May, if I'm not mistaken. Got a great cast. Colin Farrell, back once again after his incredible work in After Yang. And again, that's a big reason I do have this. It's a big, bold, beautiful reason, if you will, why I have this at number 2. Because Colin Farrell, who deserved his Oscar nomination a few years ago for the non-After Yang film that he did, The Banshees of Inisherin, also really great, and he was fantastic in that film. However, I think you could argue that his best performance that year was in After Yang, but that's partially what made that year so great. Is it was the year of Colin Farrell. He was fantastic.
The way we talk about Nicholas Hoult in 2024, that was Colin Farrell in that particular year.
Exactly. It was the year of Colin Farrell, and there's something about After Yang that on a spiritual level took me to a different realm. I deeply, deeply loved that film. Not only did it have some of the best performances of the year, it had the best opening scene of the year. That was incredible. That was a lot of fun. It's this incredibly rich, nuanced film thematically. And it has one of the most underrated scores of all time.
That's a fair point.
That no one talked about except for me and you and nobody else. But that score was deeply, deeply moving. It was really, really incredible. And I loved it. After Yang, simply one of the best films of 2022.
Yeah, it's very good.
And now he is back once again with this film. And again, working with Colin Farrell. So again, it's not just that it's Kogonada. It's coming off the heels of that specifically and how special I think that film is. That's why I have this here at number 2. But it also stars Margot Robbie, who is really great. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Joni Turner-Smith is in this as well. A really, really wonderful cast that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
However, the one thing that is really intriguing about this, and this will be my last thought, and then I'll let you jump in here. This is his first film that he did not write.
That's what I was just going to say.
He is collaborating with Seth Weiss here, who wrote The Menu, a film that I was really, really intrigued by as well. I really like The Menu.
So interesting.
So interesting. And The Menu is such a non-Kogonada film. It feels so outside of his wheelhouse that's another reason I'm intrigued here. It's Kogonada not writing the script for one, and also picking a screenwriter whose last work was nothing like his. So I don't know what to expect from these two guys working together. So there's an extra intrigue and mystery now to this movie that I find so tantalizing.
That was literally the point I was going to bring up, was that he's not writing this one. This is written by Seth Weiss of The Menu fame, and I have no idea how this is going to work. And yet that intrigue, much like my intrigue for The Bride, the Maggie Gyllenhaal film, it's a similar kind of intrigue, wondering how is this going to work? What is this going to be? Is this going to be a new trajectory for Kogonada? Is this a change of course? And that's interesting. So for those reasons, it's an honorable mention of mine. I'm glad we get to highlight it here because he is one of your guys, and I really love his 2 films that he's done thus far as well. In fact, even the episode that he directed for The Acolyte was probably the best episode that they had. So at least it felt like it was directed, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Go figure. Bring an actual artist and an actual director in, and it looks like it was made by human hands, right?
Yeah.
Go figure. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is Kogonada is good at his job, and I look forward to this one.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Cannot wait to see how he follows up after Yang. I don't expect this to be quite as spiritual as that film, given that Seth Weiss is involved.
Maybe.
But what is that going to look like? I don't know. I'm so intrigued. I can't wait. So yeah, a big, bold, beautiful journey. That is my number 2. All right, our number 1 most anticipated film of the year. I'm so excited. Let's dive in. What do you got at number 1?
Mine's a basic pick, Judy. Mine is a basic pick. Anytime Paul Thomas Anderson has a new film coming out, I'm first in line. Yeah, I'm first in line. I don't know if this one has a confirmed title yet. I know people are citing this as The Battle of Bacton Cross, I think is its working title. So I'm going to refer it as that at this point. Once again, PTA working with a great cast. Leonardo DiCaprio finally working with PTA. I think that there gives me such a level of intrigue. Of course, working once again with Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn, Regina Hall is in this. Alana Haim returning with PTA once again.
Yes.
I think the thing that gets me most excited about this one is apparently it's rumored to be an adaptation of the novel Vineland from Thomas Pynchon. This is a novel that came out in 1990. And the last time that PTA adapted one of Pynchon's novels was Inherent Vice, which I think is a very underappreciated PTA film. I love that film so much. And if it's going to be anything similar to that, I cannot wait for this event film. Every time PTA has a film coming out, it feels like an event film for many of us who are indeed cinephiles, right? We are first in line to see this man. And I cannot wait to see him get back into that comedic weirdness once again. And apparently there might be some sci-fi components in this movie as well. There's some weird rumors and speculatory things about it. The intrigue is there for sure, like with many of these other films I talked about. But PTA, anytime he has a film coming out, I don't care what it is, I'm first in line. And it's most likely always going to top my list, depending on what else is coming out that year.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And this is partially why I do not have it in my top 5, but this is my number 6. So I guessed correctly here. So we're going to end up having 10 different films to talk about, which I do really love. That doesn't always happen since we share the same brain. But in this case, because we are drift compatible, I was able to determine that this was going to be on Brennan's list, and I completely agree with you.
It's funny you say that, because the film that I left off my top 5 intentionally is what I think will be your number 1. So I'm curious to see if we had a very similar kind of mentality going into constructing our lists.
Okay, we'll see how that plays out.
I might have to guess what it is before you go into it to see if I'm right.
Okay, we'll see. But yeah, PTA, totally with you. On a true objective list, this might make its way into that top 5. Although for all the reasons I mentioned, I'm deeply, deeply in love and curious for the 4 films that I've already mentioned. But yeah, PTA, an event film. It has to be on your top 10 somewhere at the very least.
Yep.
And I cannot wait. Yeah, him getting to work with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think maybe part of the reason it didn't crack my 5 is there's not a ton of information yet.
Right.
And maybe that's also kind of the intrigue, though, at the same time.
Sure. Yeah.
What is this going to be like? Who knows? I don't know. But
with PTA, who cares?
PTA. Yeah, exactly. Who cares? It's going to be fantastic.
Absolutely.
So, and just him getting to work with Leo again is going to be great. So, all right. I have that at number 6, so it is in my top 10. Yeah. What do you think my number 1 is? I'm curious.
I think you're going with Celine Song.
That would be a great guess.
You're not going with Materialists? Wow. Okay.
No, that is number 8 on my list, actually.
Okay.
So it is in my 10. You are close. It is in my 10.
Okay. Well, that's the one I left off my top 5 because I thought it would be in your list somewhere. Either way, I guess it didn't matter where my estimation went because your number 1 didn't make my 5 anyway. So
clearly.
Yeah. So it still worked out.
So here's what's funny about my number 1 here. A couple of years ago, knowing that this film was going to come out, if you asked me several years ago about this film, I would be like, get out of my face. No way. I don't care at this point. I do not care. However, as of a few years ago, that very much changed. Very, very much changed. I'm even surprising myself here, but when I was looking at all of the films, we just talked about some great filmmakers, and we'll get to more even in honorable mentions, right?
Yeah.
Talking about Park Chan-wook, Paul Thomas Anderson. Who else has Lynn Ramsey? We talked about Terrence Malick might have a new film coming out this year. So many great filmmakers. Soderbergh, a Coen brother. There's going to be a Coen brother movie coming out. Noah Baumbach, maybe. There was one film, though, that I was the most excited about. And that is, are you ready for it?
Okay. You have to give a nice pause here because I'm actually really enjoying this anticipation. I'm looking at my list that I have here and I'm wondering, did I miss something? Or is it something so obscure in one of these ones that he just happens to have this weird excitement for? I have another guess as to what it could be, but I don't really want to say it because if it's not that, I want to save this one for later.
Okay.
So,
fair.
Yeah, you know what? Just go ahead. We've been beating around the bush for too long.
All right. My number 1, my most anticipated film of 2025, Avatar, Fire, and Ash.
That's not where
Cameron.
That's not where I thought you were going to go. So I'm glad I didn't say anything.
I am so excited for Goat Cameron to come back with Avatar, Fire, and Ash. If you asked me a few years ago when The Way of Water was coming out, if I was even looking to this film at all, I would have told you to get out of my face. There's no way that film is even coming out. I wasn't convinced The Way of Water was coming out until I was sitting in the theater and it started to play. And even leading up to it, even during the trailers, I was unconvinced. And then it played.
You had the right to be.
Yeah. And then it played. I first saw it at a critic screening. And, there's a few critics in there. And it was in 3D, weirdly. I don't know why, but that's what they gave to us.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And I tell you what, the amount of hashtag JD tears that I shed in that critic screening was unbelievable. I did not anticipate that I would fall in love with that film as I did. And then I got to take Sam to see it in theaters as well. And watching that with him took it to a whole new level as well.
Sure.
I loved it. And then when that film came out on VOD, so I saw it twice in theaters, and then it comes out on demand, and we buy it immediately because Sam loved it as well.
Okay, good.
And you know how young kids are when they find something they love, they watch it 1,000 times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, because it's 3 hours long, we didn't watch it 1,000 times, but we certainly watched it a few more times at home as well. And I tell you what, every single time, I cried at the exact same parts. The exact same parts every time. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen
you're
it.
adorable.
There was one moment, and this is really funny and borderline embarrassing, but there was one moment where he's watching it. Sam was watching it on his iPad on his way to soccer practice. So he's in the back seat of the car watching it on his iPad as we're on the road. And it gets to that moment at the end when they're having to bury, spoiler alert for The Way of Water, when they're having to bury the older son there at the end in that gorgeous little moment there. And even though I cannot see it, I am only hearing it, but obviously I can visualize it in my mind.
Sure.
I am undone. Like Sam is in the back. I'm uncontrollably sobbing up in the front seat. Just totally losing it. Totally losing it. I did not expect to fall in love with that film the way that I did. I should have never have doubted Goat Cameron. He is the GOAT for a reason.
I mean, we had every reason to doubt him because of Avatar. Right?
Avatar.
Okay, like I don't necessarily think The Way of Water is one of the greatest sequels ever made, but I will say this. I think it's one of the greatest sequel improvements ever made. When you look at the elevation and quality between a first film and its second film, Avatar: The Way of Water, I think, is one of the best examples of that. It is, and I still stand by this, it is significantly better than that first Avatar.
Yes.
Because unlike that first Avatar, this one is actually a movie. It's not just the spectacle. This is actually, if you strip away the visual beauty of The Way of Water, which I wouldn't recommend you do, you still have a good movie there. You still have a compelling movie there.
And that's a really important note, because when you watch Avatar now, at least when I watch Avatar, a film that at the time was noted for its state-of-the-art visuals, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was marketed on. And look, at the time in 2009, the visuals of Avatar, they were extraordinary.
They were.
However, in 2024, I don't think it plays all that great visually.
I think that's fair.
It has aged quite a lot. And when the story isn't there, and I don't think the story is there, when all that was carrying it was its visuals, when that is stripped away, you have a pretty mediocre film. And that's how I feel about Avatar. So you're all right. That is partially why I'm even surprised that where we're at now. I mean, the sequel comes out 15 years later. The first film isn't all that great. It hasn't aged well. And then The Way of Water comes out, and not only is it gorgeous visually, but yes, it has a striking emotional core that, as I noted, at least for me, every single time I watch it, I am deeply moved. An incredible score, sometimes poetic. Like I love it.
Great lead performance.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Sam Worthington with the surprise performance of the decade. I did not know he had that in him. Did not at all know he had that in him. Incredible. That's another reason I think I have it this high. Not only am I curious to see what Goat Cameron brings, what is Sam Worthington? Can he do that again?
Well, yeah. The level of surprise that The Way of Water had all these movies can do is go up, I guess. Like, it's like they're on a trajectory now where they're proving themselves for once. Obviously that first Avatar proved itself for a lot of people. I wasn't really one of them when it first came out. But The Way of Water really surprised me as well. Now I'm on board with this franchise. And I feel like if anything, that first Avatar was just, okay, this is the introduction to this world to see if this technology works. Now that The Way of Water is here, let's actually tell stories. Let's make movies.
Exactly.
Now.
Oh, and that's why I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see how Cameron ups the ante, and he's talking about how in order for these stories to continue upping the ante, they have to make some bold decisions.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? We saw him do that in The Way of Water. So I am curious as to what that means for Fire and Ash.
Yeah.
And also, just to put it out there, I know some people are already criticizing Fire and Ash in terms of how the trajectory of Cameron's Avatar is maybe thieving from the animated Avatar. I don't care. Do not care. Do not care at all. Do not care. Could not care less.
I mean, look, I care about that first Avatar because there was no sincerity to that movie, but The Way of Water had it.
Which is fair, but that wasn't thieving from The Last Airbender. I'm talking about how...
but it was thieving from so many other things.
Oh, it's I agree. No, I agree. But the fact that the criticism specifically to thieving from The Last Airbender, do not care. In fact, I'm excited for it. I don't care. I'm curious to see what he does with it. Maybe he could tell a better story. I don't know.
Maybe.
Certainly better than
if
whatever,
anything, then this can be our live action version of The Last Airbender because we haven't really gotten a good one yet.
Because the other one doesn't exist. Exactly. Anyway, I'm excited for Fire and Ash. Did not know that I was going to be saying those words a couple of years ago, but here we are. It's my number one.
If it does come out this year.
We're assuming that, look, it's going to have that December release.
Yeah.
This is already in the can. It's coming out.
It better. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah. Okay. 6 through 10. What do you have? 6 through 10.
All right. So my number 6 is the live action adaptation of How to Train Your Dragon. It's called The Legend of Ochi.
Okay.
You're probably wondering where I'm going with this. I'm not even sure if you know about this movie or if you've seen it.
No, I have it on my list here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is A24 working in the family film sphere once again. And the last time they did that, I guess, was Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
Yeah.
But this is a debut film from Isaiah Saxon, I believe the filmmaker's name is, working alongside actors like Emily Watson, Willem Dafoe, Finn Wolfhard, and Helena Zengel headlining this. I think, if anything, it's really the film's trailer that really hooked me. The utilization of Kate Bush's Hounds of Love and the whole almost E.T.-like vibe they're going for. This, once again, speaks to that idea of smaller films that have perhaps big qualities to them that I just want to see more of. So I'm looking forward to it for those reasons. My number 7 is Materialists, the Celine Song film, the new one that she has after Past Lives, working with Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, Chris Evans, which begs the question, will this finally be the film to break the Chris Evans post-MCU curse?
I hope so.
Maybe.
I hope so. Yeah. But it's another love triangle, so I think it's going to work.
I mean, it seems very much up Celine Song's alley. So I'm looking forward to that. My number 8 is a film I didn't expect to ever be interested in because it's a filmmaker I don't really like all that much, but I am weirdly looking forward to Osgood Perkins' new film, The Monkey. And I think it's
interesting.
I think it's because I like a lot of what he does as a filmmaker, but I never really liked any of his films that I've seen. But I think him taking those sensibilities into a horror movie that's meant to be a bit more fun, I actually think really is a good idea. And that's why I'm looking forward to it. I think that's the right choice given what I haven't liked about him so far, but what I do like about his, directorial touches. I think it fits this type of material very well.
That's
so I'm looking forward to that.
How interesting. Okay.
For me as well. My number 9, I think I mentioned earlier, Park Chan-wook, No Other Choice. My number 10 is the film I thought you were going to surprise me with at your number 1. The Accountant 2.
Oh, no, but that's a fascinating guess, though. I am intrigued for that, though. Yeah.
No idea what to expect with this one. I think the first The Accountant was kind of a surprise in many ways. I don't know if I really loved it, but it's a really interesting movie. And this sequel has been toyed around for a long time. The fact that we're finally getting it, I'm really intrigued to see what Gavin O'Connor has up his sleeve.
Okay, very good stuff. For my 6 through 10, at number 6, I noted I have the Paul Thomas Anderson film. At number 7, I have Kelly Reichardt, another one of my filmmakers here, right? I love Kelly Reichardt. She's one of the best working today. The Mastermind is her new film, starring John Magaro, Josh O'Connor, Elena Hamm, Hope Davis, Bill Camp is in the film as well.
Yeah, good stuff.
Very, very intrigued with what Kelly Reichardt has next. Some sort of crime drama that I cannot wait. This is going to be distributed by Mubi, who had a really, really good 2024. So I'm hoping that they're able to continue the trend by getting some really great films. And honestly, like, I feel like Kelly Reichardt and Mubi fit together very, very well. So I am curious to see what she does with the Mastermind, but she is one of my favorites. So I do have here at number 7. And number 8, I mentioned Materialist, Celine Song.
Yeah.
Completely agree with you. I'm very excited to see if she can get an actual performance out of Chris Evans for once.
I know, seriously.
That would be great. So I am looking forward to whatever that love triangle looks like.
Yeah.
At number 9, this is a little bit of a cheat. There are 2 films here, but it is one filmmaker. And it is not Steven Soderbergh, as much as I love Soderbergh.
Oh, let me see. Is it oh wait, maybe no. Okay, never mind. I'm on the wrong track. You go ahead. I thought it was someone else for a second.
But one of our guys, someone that you love as much as I do, and that is the great Richard Linklater. Potentially has 2 films. And honestly, I do hope they both come out this year because they're both operating in a very similar way, right? So the first one is Nouvelle Vague. I'm not sure how to say it. I don't speak French, but this is the movie that depicts the making of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. And I'm
so
very, very excited for this. Famously here on the show, I did not love Breathless as much as most cinephiles tend to do. One of those classics that I was a little bit mixed on. Maybe I will like the making of Breathless more than Breathless itself. I don't know. But I love Richard Linklater, and peeking behind the curtain as far as the making of that film goes, I think it's going to be really fascinating and perhaps a little bit different from what we've seen with Linklater recently. However, I do hope that the second film of his potentially coming out this year, I do hope it comes out because similarly, it is a biopic about the making of art. Yeah. And the second film that might come out this year is Blue Moon. And this is about the songwriter Lawrence Hart and the opening night of Oklahoma, the musical Oklahoma. Yeah. So Ethan Hawke stars as Lawrence Hart here. So it's Ethan Hawke and Richard Linklater getting back together. It also stars Andrew Scott and Margaret Qualley, as well as Bobby Cannavale. So the 2025 will be the year of Linklater making movies about making movies or art, in the second case, theater. So I'm very, very excited to see what he has up his sleeve for both of those.
That's why I hope they both come out this year, because they feel like they could be parallels with each other, almost like companion pieces. And maybe they're meant to be, and we don't know it just yet. But that's ultimately why I didn't have him on my list, because I don't know if both of these movies are going to end up coming out this year or just one. And I don't know if they are meant to function, in conjunction with one another. So that uncertainty just left it a little too uncertain for me to really consider it as one of my top 10, but he is one of my guys. You're absolutely right. And I look forward to everything he has coming out.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that as well. And then number 10 for me, a little bit of a surprise here, given our reaction to the film that came before, but I am really looking forward to how it might stick the landing here for this franchise. And that's Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. I did not love Dead Reckoning. However,
I'm with you.
I love Mission Impossible. I love it.
Me too.
I love it. And if this film is able to remedy the issues that I have for Dead Reckoning, it could still be a 2-parter that I end up coming to love in the end. So I'm going to maintain hope, because Tom Cruise has very rarely steered me wrong with this franchise. I do think that they're going to course correct, and based off of the footage and the trailers we've seen, there's enough.
It looks better. It looks better. Yeah.
I just can't help but be excited for this franchise and potentially being the last one.
It's a question mark for me. That's really the big thing I have with it. And the question mark really does stem from the fact that I'm with you. I did not care for Dead Reckoning. And that question mark is just what lingers for me. But I'm excited for it because I love this franchise. But how it's going to connect to Dead Reckoning is the big question mark I have. So I'm just not really sure.
Absolutely. So that is my top 10. I'm very, very much looking forward to those. Real quickly, maybe we can just kind of list off a bunch of others. We noted Terrence Malick earlier. Manuel Conruso is a name that I wanted to mention here. He has a new film called At the Sea. That name matters to me because this is the director of White God, that was one of the best films of its year. I really like Pieces of a Woman as well. I think that was a little underrated the year it came out. So he has a new movie coming out this year. James Gray, you and I, big James Gray fans. He has a new film in Paper Tiger coming out.
Paper Tiger, that's what it's called. I knew it was Paper something, but I forgot the other portion of it.
Christian Petzold, another one of those names that we really like. He has a new film coming out this year as well. Soderbergh might have 3 movies. I've seen 3 different titles.
Why would I not be surprised? He's got Presence, he's got Black Bag, and both of them are coming out in the first half of 2025. But I guess there's another one later on. I wouldn't be surprised if he does.
Yeah, and it's called The Christophers.
Okay.
Which I honestly don't know too much about it. Maybe it's one of those that comes out next year, like early next year.
Okay.
I don't know. But that is another title that I've seen as far as potentially coming out this year.
Okay.
A name that I find intriguing, and this is a little unconventional for the film scene. However, Aziz Ansari's directorial debut is coming out this year.
Yeah,
I've always found him fascinating as a comedian. Because his style of comedy is very distinct. There's no one that does comedy the way that he does it. And I thought his TV show was really, really good as well. And now he's making his way into the film space as a director. And so his directorial debut in Good Fortune is coming out. And I'm very, very intrigued by that one as well.
Same here.
David Robert Mitchell coming back for the first time since Under the Silver Lake with Flower Vale Street. Intrigued by that. Derek Sanfrance is also coming back for the first time in a while with Roofman.
Yeah.
Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, Jim Jarmusch coming back for the first time.
Yep.
Since 2018? It's been a while for him as well.
Yeah.
Who else did we need to mention here?
There's quite a few here I have as well.
Ronan Day Lewis, I think we need to shout out there because DDL is coming out of retirement.
That's true.
And that's going to be exciting. I can't forget Chloe Zhao.
Hamnet, yeah.
Yep. That's another one I feel like we have to mention. Luca Guadagnino, shocking, has another movie. I'm surprised he doesn't have 2 in the can for 2025.
What's it called? After the Fall, I think it's called, or something like that.
After the Hunt.
After the Hunt, that's it. Okay, yeah. I knew it was after the something.
Here's a name that a lot of people might not recognize. John McLean is the filmmaker. He has a new movie coming out called Tornado. The reason that name is fascinating to me is that he has not made a movie in 10 years. Maybe even longer, because I'm trying to recall when it came out. I think it was 2014. Slow West was the film. It was this fascinating little film with, I think, Michael Fassbender. Was it Fassbender?
Michael Fassbender, and was it Cody Smith-McPhee in that as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I thought was really intriguing. One of the more fascinating films of that year. And
it's kind of funny, too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is his first film since that. So crazy. Speaking of Fassbender, there was another film of his on my list. I'm trying to find it off the cuff here that I had written down. I'm going to have to come back to it.
Okay.
We got to mention Spike Lee, Highest to Lowest. I believe is the name of it.
Yeah, good call.
The remake there that he's doing. Duke Johnson with the actor. That's another one of those that I feel like has been on this list for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
The Safdie brothers, individually, right? So
I was going to
Benny Safdie doing the Smashing Machine, Josh Safdie doing Marty Supreme. Both of those look really curious, really intriguing as well. What else do we have? Danny Boyle, 28 years later. Edward Berger, The Ballad of a Small Prayer. He's going to have another one here. Ari Aster should have a new film in Eddington.
Apparently this like epic horror western or something like that, I think it is.
Yeah. How about Travis Knight? I
remember that guy. Yeah, Mr. Leica.
He's got a new film, Wildwood, I believe is the name of it.
And that's a Leica film, so he's directing the next film from Leica.
Yep, another Leica film, and that's why I had to have that written down here as well. Ryan Johnson, a new Knives Out film, of course.
Wake Up Dead Man.
Looking forward to that. Yep. Edgar Wright has a new film coming out. I know his last few have been a little bit more polarizing, but generally Edgar Wright is.
Yeah, and apparently it's another adaptation of Stephen King's The Running Man, this time featuring Glenn Powell. So should be fun.
Yep. Cameron Crowe has a Joni Mitchell biopic coming out. I don't know how you feel about that.
I'm very curious about that. It's been a while since Cameron Crowe has really done anything. So
I know.
Hopefully he's not a little rusty.
Isn't this his first film since Aloha?
I think so. I mean, he's done a few he's done some work with some documentaries. I know he did the Pearl Jam 20 documentary, and he's also worked on a show like Roadies, which apparently didn't do very well. So hopefully he's not rusty. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to see. I mean, because generally I really like Cameron Crowe. Misstep with Aloha for sure, willing to admit, but generally I like myself some Cameron Crowe, so I wanted to throw his name out there as well. There's a new film called Holland, Michigan, from Mimi Cave, who directed Fresh a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Is that Sebastian Stan?
That was Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar Jones.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Mimi Cave and Holland, Michigan, real city, by the way, on the west coast of the state. Yeah. So it's right up there up against Lake Michigan. Trey Edward Schultz is back for the first time since Waves with Hurry Up Tomorrow.
This one looks interesting because it stars The Weeknd, and it's apparently based on his upcoming album later this month called Hurry Up Tomorrow. So
that part I did not know. I knew The Weeknd was in it. I didn't realize it tied to his new album, though.
Yeah, apparently it does. Yeah.
Fascinating. So that adds a layer of intrigue. Scott Cooper is back for the first time in a while with Deliver Me From Nowhere. Curious about that one. Greg Araki is a name that maybe not a lot of people know, but
Mysterious Skin. Yeah.
Yep. Mysterious Skin. And he has a new film called I Want Your Sex. Appropriate for
that
Greg
seems
Araki.
right. That seems right.
Yeah. So wanted to give him a shout here. Werner Herzog, I believe, has a new film called The Twilight World. Wanted to throw that out there. There's an untitled Catherine Bigelow White House thriller.
Yeah.
Supposedly is coming out this year as well. Gore Verbinski has a new film, and I love a little Gore Verbinski with Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die.
He needs to make more big movies. That's a filmmaker we need to see just taking chances again, like with A Cure for Wellness.
Absolutely. Jonah Hill has another directorial effort in Outcome that comes out later this year. Paul Greengrass with The Lost Bust. Armando Iannucci is back. It's been a few years for him, but he has a new film called Growth. Andrew Stanton with In the Blink of an Eye, I think could be interesting. I'm sure there's some others I'm missing, but as far as some of the bigger films, Fantastic Four is coming out this year.
Yeah.
I'm curious how Marvel handles that. It's such a big move. This is going to be a big pivot point for the MCU. So certainly intrigued by that. We have Jurassic World Rebirth. Joseph Kosinski is back with the F1 movie that's coming out. Lilo and Stitch, Ballerina, Tron Ares, I'm curious about.
Yeah.
I love the world of Tron, flaws it all. So I don't know what to expect there. Predator Badlands.
Oh yeah.
What else we got? Superman is coming out. Wicked for Good, of course. Freakier Friday, the sequel.
I'm actually very looking forward to that one. There are a few other Marvel films as well outside of just Fantastic Four, but Thunderbolts and very soon we're going to be getting Captain America Brave New World. So hopefully the MCU finds themselves on an upward trajectory after what they've had lately. I will say, of the big blockbusters coming out this year, I wouldn't say this one is the one I'm most anticipating, but it's the one I'm most curious about, and that's Jurassic World Rebirth.
Yeah.
After the conclusion of a so-called Jurassic World trilogy, Universal then fast tracks this movie out of nowhere with this type of talent tied to it. Gareth Edwards as director, for basically getting him to drop everything he was working on just to work on this movie. I just the fast tracking of it and how it was formulated has me so curious. Do they really trust this thing for once? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know what to expect. This franchise has been very weird. Very weird lately.
And not necessarily in the good ways.
And not necessarily in a good way. I mean, we joked, given how the last one ended, that it's going to just become Planet of the Apes, but dinosaurs. Did they commit to that? I don't know.
Given this plot synopsis for Jurassic World Rebirth, apparently it's more so about the health industry and how it plays into the dino DNA. I guess it hasn't become Planet of the Apes just yet.
Yeah, and it's a completely new cast, right?
It is. Apparently, it's a completely new set of characters, a completely new story that's disconnected from the original Jurassic World trilogy. I think it's set like 10 or 15 years later, if I'm not mistaken.
Great. In some ways I can respect it because this is a little bit of that old school Fox X-Men. I don't give a shit about this continuity at all.
Also, getting the fact that it's written by David Koepp, who's a very tight screenwriter and was also the screenwriter on the first 2 Jurassic movies with Spielberg.
Sure.
This feels like a course correction. It feels like Universal.
It might be.
Yeah.
Rebirth. I mean, they're not being subtle about that.
Quite literally, it is a rebirth.
Yeah. That would make sense. And look, if you're not going to be subtle about it, you might as well go all in.
Might as well lean in. Yeah.
Really
These movies are not about subtlety, right?
No, not at all. So, yeah, I mean, it should be a really interesting year. And I am curious how, because, and there's also, as many movies as we brought up there, and we brought up quite a few. There's dozens others that we're just not familiar with yet.
Yorgos Lanthimos has a new film.
Lanthimos has a new film.
David Cronenberg maybe has a new film coming out, The Shrouds. This is one I had written down that I think sounds really interesting. The movie's called The Rivals of Amzia King, I believe it's called. It's the new film from Andrew Patterson, who directed The Vast of Night. And the film stars Matthew McConaughey and Kurt Russell. Like, I don't care what the movie's about. That just sounds great with that cast. Yeah, that's enough right there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, yeah, there's a new one from Kyle Edward Ball, who was one of my discoveries a few years ago for Skinamarink. And look, talk about a polarized horror film. That film is deeply polarized. You either love it or hate it. It's one of those movies. Yeah. I was on I really enjoyed that thing. And he has a new film called The Land of Nod. So looking forward to that one as well. I think this could be a really good deep year. It has incredible potential. I'm very excited for it. So,
and we didn't even highlight the most important film coming out in 2025, Happy Gilmore 2.
Oh God, there's that as well. I'm sure there's a bunch we missed. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, or if we forgot something, let us know. You can leave a comment below, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can always email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. All right. I think we're going to end things there. Again, be sure to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment, all that fun stuff. It really helps us out. Any final thoughts, Brennan? Did I miss anything?
2025 is going to be a doozy. I'm surprised I had the energy for this one. For those that pay attention to football, you may have been watching the Eagles-Rams games. It looked like a reimagining of the 2013 Super Bowl between those two same teams in the snow, the Snow Bowl, as they tend to call it. We got hit hard here just outside Philadelphia. I'm doing this podcast just after shoveling our driveway. So I'm glad I made it through.
Yeah, I'm glad you did as well. That was a wild game. It was the night of snowballs in the NFL because Buffalo got hit pretty hard as well. They did, as one could imagine. So, yeah, lots of snow in the northeast part of the country. So I do hope everyone is staying safe out there. Here in lowly South Florida, it's still 74 degrees, and I'll be perfectly honest, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of all this warm weather all the goddamn time.
Yeah,
I need it to be a little cold, a little bit.
Well, if you want to take some of our 10 inches of snow that we got,
I will shove it that way. Just shove it to you guys. Be on the lookout for that. At any rate, stay with us through 2025. I'm very much looking forward to discussing and seeing all these movies with you all.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Avatar, telling you.
2025, baby.